Welcome to our Bible teaching on healing. Today I want to encourage you and to build your faith in Jesus as your healer. The story is found in Mark 5 and verses 24 to 34. It is about a woman with an issue of blood. And Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. And a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse. And when she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind and touched his garment. For she said, if I could just touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press, and he said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, thou sayest, the multitude is thronging thee, and thou sayest, who touched me? And he looked around about to see her that had done this thing. But rather the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith has made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. In verse 24, many people followed after Jesus, and there were many people bumping into him. You see, this was a busy marketplace. There were many people touching Jesus in this marketplace, and it meant nothing to them. They didn't even know who he was. He was nothing to them. He was just another person out shopping. They couldn't have faith in him because they didn't know him. And that is the same today for many Christians. They don't know Jesus as their healer. And they're just like those people in the busy marketplace. They don't know him. But there was one woman in this large crowd who had an issue of blood 12 years. And this was a woman's problem, and the blood issue would not stop. For 12 years is a long time to suffer with any disease. And I'm sure she was ready to give up many's a time, because that is what sickness does to you. It makes you want to give up. And she had been to see many doctors, and she had suffered many things at their hands. The doctors had to try many different methods to try and heal her. And things haven't changed, even in our modern world. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease itself. When you get chemo for cancer, it kills other good cells in your body. And it poisons your system, killing off your immune system. And I know people who, after they have went through chemotherapy, say that they would rather die than go through it again. And this woman spent all that she had, all her money on doctors and on medical help. And she suffered many things at the doctor's hands. But she got worse instead of better. Because of the Levitical law, this woman would have been under quarantine and separated from mixing from other people. There were restraints upon her activities, and even her communications with others. This woman probably had to live in a separate room apart from her husband and her children. She couldn't even hold or kiss her children because she was unclean. She had no physical contact with her husband. And if she was seen on the street, she would have been stoned to death. And can you imagine how this affected her emotions? No contact with her husband, her children, or the outside world for 12 years. And somehow she heard about Jesus. It is possible that she heard someone testifying on the street of how Jesus healed them. One thing we do know is that she was convinced that Jesus was going to heal her. She said to herself, if I could only touch his clothes, the clothes that he is wearing, I know I will be healed. And that became her plan, to get close to Jesus, to touch his clothes. And she knew within herself, I am sure I will be healed. And she pushed forward into the crowd as Jesus passed by. And she probably had her head covered, not wanting someone to recognize her, because she was an outcast. She was an outcast because of her illness. You see, people feared anyone with a long-term illness because they were afraid of catching the same disease themselves. It's a bit like now with the COVID. People will become very violent against you if they see you without a mask. Fear makes people turn on each other. And back in Bible times, they stoned the person to death if they broke the restrictions. And this woman took her chances, and she finally, she went out and she pushed in and touched Jesus, and she was healed at that moment. Her suffering was over, and she knew it because she felt it in her body. Healing had taken place. She had touched Jesus and she was healed. And verse 29 says, she felt in her body. And that word felt in the Greek, it means to come to know, to recognize, to perceive. Luke 8 and verse 44 says, she came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood staunched. Luke the doctor uses the word staunched, meaning to stand. This word is used in various applications. It can mean literally or figuratively. There was no way this woman could have checked to see if the issue of blood had stopped. There was too many people all around her, and it happened so quick. In her heart, she knew she was healed. When you have faith, you don't need to see. You already know you are healed. 2 Corinthians 5 and 7 says, for we walk by faith and not by sight. She felt it in her spirit. She knew. She perceived it. And that is what faith is. You are believing in what you cannot see. Jesus knew that she touched him, although there were many people in the marketplace who had touched and pushed up against him. There was only one person with faith, and it was this woman. Jesus asked, who touched me? But his disciples didn't understand. They didn't even understand what he meant. They said, everyone is touching you. And we're in a large crowd. The disciples were carnal. They looked at what was happening in the marketplace. But Jesus looked around and seen her. It wasn't the touch of his clothes that Jesus was talking about. It was someone touched him by faith. See, many people talk about Jesus, but very few have faith in him. The woman knew what had just happened. There was no way that she could have slipped into the crowd and not testify of what had really happened. She touched Jesus physically and spiritually, and she was healed. She told her testimony to Jesus and the people around her. And Jesus said to her, "Your faith has made you whole." Some people say to me that healing has stopped with the disciples of Jesus. Well, if they are right, God has given us another way to be healed, and that is by faith. Jesus said to her, "Your faith has made you whole." Not my faith, but your faith has made you whole. Do I believe in faith healing? And the answer is yes. The Bible teaches it. So what is God saying to us from his word? He is saying it doesn't matter how long you've been sick or how much money you have spent trying to get well. He is the only one who heals. God is saying, I am the only one who can heal. Because doctors can't forgive sins. Doctors can only treat the symptoms, but they cannot heal. The woman said, "If I could only touch his clothes, I would be healed." You see, the woman professed in her heart that she would be healed before it actually happened. She had received her healing in her heart even when she was still sick, even when she still had the blood issue. And that is faith. You believe before you were healed. When you are still feeling sick, faith is not seen, touched or felt. Faith is believing in God's promises. God said by his stripes you were healed. Your faith is based on his word and not on what you see and feel. Do you need Jesus to make you whole today? The word whole used by Jesus in verse 34 means healed from every disease. And it also means to be saved or born again, made whole, complete. The issue of blood was dealt with. Her sin was dealt with. And her emotions were dealt with. She was made whole, complete. When we read this story, we never think of how much emotional damage this woman had. She had felt rejection. She was rejected by her family, her friends, and those around her because of her illness. She couldn't have intimacy with her husband or even kiss her children or hug them. She suffered great loss. She suffered this loss for many years. And Jesus said to her, "Your faith has made you whole spiritually, physically, and emotionally." This woman heard about Jesus. She heard the testimony of others who were healed. Her faith was built up inside of her when she heard of how Jesus healed others. And your testimony of healing can help others put their trust in Jesus as their healer. This woman had a plan. She had a time to carry out her plan, and she even planned how her healing was going to take place. She made a plan of how she would get to Jesus with the restrictions that was on her. If she was caught in the street, she could have been stoned to death. She had a time in her plan when this was going to happen. And she also planned how it was going to happen. She said, if I can only touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. If you need healing for sickness or any sickness that you have, Jesus is your healer. Jesus wants to heal you because it is God's will to heal all who comes to him. He never changes. That is all we have time for today in this program. Read the scriptures that we have read in today's teaching and let them speak to you, and ask God to help you see his will on healing. Jehovah Rapha, the God who is our healer.